Hello, hello. I was a bit early off the mark there. Hello and welcome everyone to this third part in our Catch the Wave webinar series. My name is Louise Hosking, IOSH President, and I'm delighted to be your host for today as we continue to look at what sustainability is, the importance of people in sustainability, and specifically the role that OSH can play in creating and maintaining socially sustainable businesses. With our Catch the Wave campaign in full flow, we continue to explore the importance of the links between good health and safety and effective social sustainability. At the end of 2021, the campaign saw us return to the fundamentals of good OSH. Now, this third webinar in the series asks, how can we move forward? Has health and safety stalled? And if so, how can we change the narrative? How can we influence managers across our organisations in how leading with a socially sustainable agenda will add value? This is our third webinar in the series, so if you have not yet been able to watch the first two webinars, I do encourage you to do so by visiting the Catch the Wave campaign page on the IOSH website or on our YouTube channel. Over the last 2 years, there has been a seismic shift in the wider public recognition for the need to manage safety and health at work. What can we do to harness this new perspective and perception of our roles? So today's session will look at the pivotal role that the health and safety professional has, not only in explaining the criticality of good OSH to socially sustainable business practice, but also in persuading and convincing businesses of the folly in not adapting this approach. I'd like to welcome three individuals who join us today on our panel and to consider these questions. First, I'd like to introduce April Liu. April is the Global Sustainability Director of Lai Yi Group, the footwear manufacturer established in 1986, who specialised in vulcanised cold cement, functional hiking and army boots. April brings to this webinar over 10 years experience in strategic HR and sustainability in the footwear manufacturing industry. Goal-orientated April is a creative problem solver and solution finder whose pragmatic and rational thinking makes her an expert at identifying shortcomings in systems. A very warm welcome to you, April. Next to join us is James Wise. James has over 20 years experience in environment and sustainability roles. James has held a variety of site-based roles in the brewing industry, including health and safety advisor and group sustainability manager, in which he was responsible for day-to-day management of the sustainability programs and reporting functions. Prior to founding Wise Sustainability Limited, James also held roles with the manufacturers organisation Make UK, latterly as the National Sustainability Lead of a team of specialist EHS consultants. James has been responsible for developing and delivering accredited and bespoke training courses for the past 10 years, including the Diploma in Sustainable Business Practices and the Leading with Environmental Sustainability courses. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
And our final panelist is Craig Foyle. Craig is a Chartered Fellow of IOSH and a member of the Institute of Directors and appreciates the essential link between safety and leadership. He specialises in project safety management, training and management systems, providing consultancy support for clients internationally. He has worked in the Asia Pacific, European and North American regions, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, the emergence of virtual training has expanded his reach even further into the Middle East and Africa. He has more than 23 years OSH experience working in FMCG, chemical, oil and gas, education, healthcare, and pharmaceutical industries. Craig uses IOSH courses, including leading, managing, and working safely, to support organisations in their sustainable development. In his spare time, he is also a very active volunteer and was the president of IOSH in 2017 to 2018, when I first joined the presidential team. And he is currently the chair of the IOSH Food and Drink Industries Group. Craig is passionate about raising the profile of the OSH profession and continues to engage with business leaders, OSH professionals, and other stakeholders to drive the OSH profession forward as a whole. Thanks for joining us, Craig, and welcome to our panel. So thank you to everybody here for joining us. I do have some set questions, but we do like to have a very conversational approach to this. So if you are in the audience and have some questions for us to consider, I will reach those as we go through with the questions. But I'm going to jump straight in, and my first question is really for yourself, James, and then I'm going to come to Craig. So Catch the Wave, the Catch the Wave IOSH campaign that we're running at the moment, we're all talking about this, we're talking about social sustainability, but where does health and safety fit into this? So James, if I could come to you first of all with that question, and then the same question to Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and a really good question to start with, and one we could probably spend the next 55 minutes on, but just to keep it brief, when people talk about sustainability, I think most people tend to think of environment and to think of climate change and plastic in the oceans, etc., which absolutely is part of sustainability. But you really can't be a sustainable business if you're hurting people. Your people are at the heart of your business, they're at the heart of sustainability, and an engaged, safe and happy, innovative workforce, there's an easy word for me to say, is absolutely key in your sustainability program and your agenda. And just to start, I was actually just reading just before this webinar started. There's been a real increased focus around well-being within businesses, particularly in the light of COVID. And I was just reading a quick stat here that apparently, to see if this is true or not, 25% of workers in the UK at the moment are actively planning to change jobs. 25%. And the reasons stated are they just don't feel valued. There's no sense of belonging. And this includes well-being, businesses focusing on well-being. So getting your health and safety, your occupational health and safety right is absolutely key to retaining your staff. If you don't retain your staff, then you've not got a workforce, and whatever sustainability programs you have in place simply aren't going to work and aren't going to be effective. So that's where it fits. It's absolutely at the heart, along with the people, of sustainability.
And James, when we were getting ready for this webinar, you and I were very much talking about the fact that if you talk to business leaders, they talk about sustainability in their businesses all the time. So can you kind of frame where you see us fitting in that overall picture of sustainable business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I always think of sustainability is as a nested circle where you've got your profits in the middle, your social boundary, and your environmental boundaries. And in order to keep your business sustainable, you've got to keep investing into those pillars, and you're investing into your human capital. And that's where I think the debate needs to go with business leaders around making sure that they're investing into that human capital in order to keep growing the business and enabling the profit to continue to grow the profit circle as well.
So it's very much a balance, isn't it? You pull over here and it pulls in the other direction.
Absolutely. You invest into that social circle and it grows and it gives headroom for the profit circle to grow. Whereas if you're not investing into that, it starts to shrink, and that starts to then shrink in on the profit circle, and that's just going to stop your growth. You need to keep growing the business, and if you're losing 25% of your workers because they're not feeling valued, that's very soon going to have an impact on that profit circle.
Absolutely. And Craig, if I could come to you with the same question, we're talking about, we're talking about social sustainability. Is this another thing for the health and safety professionals agenda, or is it something that we've been talking about for a while?
Yeah, in support of everything that James has said, but equally, I don't think it's anything new, Louise. I think it's something that we should have been doing, and a lot of people have been doing for a long, long time. And because for me, my first role I did full time in safety and health was for an organization, and I learned very quickly that for the business to thrive, we needed to be safe and healthy. And so I tied that link straight away. And so we built safety and health into what we did. Therefore, it meant it was part of the norm. And so it made us a better organization. And so I know there's lots of talk about it now, but it's not old. It's something we should have been doing for a while, but it's certainly definitely not anything new. And I think for me, that inextricable link between worker safety, health and well-being and business being profitable and thriving is really there, because some of the organizations that I've dealt with over the years, the ones that are investing in their people and training and developing and supporting their people, they're not only extremely profitable, and if we take James's stat that he introduced with, they're still there and they want to work in that company. And so people are now deciding to not just work for money, they also want to work where they feel valued. And I'm actually talking to people at the minute that will some people may accept less money to be more valued in the role than what they do. Not suggesting that we need to devalue what we pay people in any means, but certainly support them in a way that they want to be better. And if we can integrate that with non-OSH managers and get them to believe it as well, which is part of the further topics we'll discuss, that's where we'll find the solution.
Yeah, and I think it is, and we're going to come on to talk about language as well, which I think is a really key part of all of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, turning to you, April. So we know right now the only, we talk about it a lot. We're in this volatile work environment where the only constant is change. But how can we as health and safety professionals support leaders and support managers within our organizations to manage safely and sustainably? And you're not a pure health and safety, you're an operation, very much on the operations side. So can you give me some sort of work examples from your experience of how we can support our workers and why we should do so?
Yeah, I mean, so I spent my past 15 years in factories, front lines, and we are in footwear manufacturing is labor intensive. So we are working with thousands, of workers in one facilities. And, in different countries like China, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the environment is changing. And even in the same country, some environmental impacts like climate impacts can be very different, like heat wave that hits some province in China that can really impact our productions, or some flood in Indonesia that can actually impact the workers coming to work, or COVID that hits Vietnam gradually this year. And so each province, the medical resource is different, and it impacts how workers, they see whether they want to risk their lives to come to work to make their livings. So as OSH professionals and managers at the facility, I think it's very important that need to be sensitive and agile and nimble, and to sense those changes to workers' life outside of the factories, and then able to communicate to the leaderships or communicate with the leaders or supervised managements the stakeholders and to come up with some solutions or prevention programs. So if something really big happens, how can we make everyone feel safe, like workers? So like in Vietnam, this year I see some workers that actually thinking about changing jobs. Okay, because before they want to go to the big factory to work because big factory means stable. But now they don't want to because big factory means more risk. They don't want to work with like thousands of people. They want to go to some company like with smaller size, which they feel safe. So I think as OSH professionals, we really need to pay attention to, what are the impacts to our workers. And because that impacts the productions.
I love that. And actually you've just joined the dots between James and Craig there, where you've talked about, we've got this global skills crisis at the moment, haven't we? And it's really interesting where you've actually demonstrated Craig's point that people are physically moving positions to places where they can feel psychologically and physically safe.
Yeah, and for footwear manufacturing, we cannot work from home. Mm-hmm. So that's very different from the other, industries. So when the COVID hits, we really need to help with the factories, management, and the workers how to figure out and how to reorganize our policy in order to provide safe working environments for people to come to work and to sustain their manufacturing productions.
So thank you for that. Those are really great initial insights. So I'm going to come on now, and I'm going to come to yourself next, James, and similar questions for yourself and Craig around. This is to do with culture. So thinking about internal culture and the challenges that we might face. And then I'm going to come to April to talk about culture in territories where there's maybe fewer legislative frameworks. But just thinking about culture within our organisations. So James, could you just sort of talk about the challenges we might face, but equally the opportunities that come out of those for us?
Wow, another big question. Culture is a fascinating thing. It really is. I mean, it evolves over time very, very slowly, but it can either be a major help or a major hindrance to a business. And I think there's lots of different ways of looking at culture, whether that's the culture, the overall culture of the business, or just tensions between different parts of the business. Again, just a little example. I was maybe sort of explains maybe a slightly different cultural tension, but I was recently at a site with the health and safety professional there, and he was looking to implement management systems and we had a chat, and he was saying, well, I've invited along the managing director to this meeting because I just don't think he quite gets it, and I just want you to see if you can sort of persuade him really around what we need what we're doing is the right thing. And speaking to the managing director, and he was really nice, and we had a really nice long chat around what were his goals for the year, what was he wanting to achieve. And basically it was all around, I've got the end of year report coming up, I've got this focus on profit, we've got to get back into profitability because of COVID, we've got to do this. And actually I was able to say, well, if you've got this management system in place, it will actually help to generate the report for you that you can then use somebody else. So rather than you spending your valuable management time dealing with this, we can actually have a process that actually generates this result for you. And he left the room, and after when the manager left the room, they said, never really thought about that. It was just a case of lining up the agendas and showing that health and safety is not mutually exclusive to the overall direction of the business. And I think that sort of culture where managers get into this framework, mind frame that it's all about profit, it's all about we've got to achieve goals, and I've got this report to do, I've got this pressing need. It's actually seeing that, well, actually designing your health and safety and your environmental program, but your health and safety program can actually help them to achieve that goal if it's done properly. And that's one way of overcoming those tensions. it's to work out what people want and what people need, and then align the programs to deliver that for them, help them to deliver what they need to do, ensure that the two things are actually the same thing. I think you're on mute, Louise.
I was on mute. That was bad. Yeah. So yeah, I love that. It's you know, I just running a small business myself is, you know, you have a lot of things to think about, and I think we've got to appreciate the pressures that our leaders have been under as well, and we've got to talk to them and create that environment where, you know, we look at things with a balanced approach, because we all think our priorities are the highest priorities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, Craig, a similar question to you, you know, around internal culture and, you know, how that can influence.
Well, if I just take on board your last few words you mentioned about safety as a priority. So almost every organization will say that health and safety is their utmost priority. It's number one. But actually in business, there's lots of conflicting challenges all the time. And whilst I would not expect any business to bring safety down on their mission statements below production, we also know that without production, we don't have any need for any safety. So I think for me, in terms of the tension, I'm perhaps fortunate that I get to go into an organization and ask the daft questions that no one else would ask. Why is there tension in the first place? And sometimes there's tension because that some organizations, they think safety is for the OSH team to deal with. Production people produce, OSH people do OSH. And so because of that conflict, you need to really have clearly defined roles. And the difference between safety and for an OSH manager or a non-OSH manager, thinking about the pair of them, is that we've all got that same end goal. And so for me, what can we do from a cultural perspective? Well, we can find out what the challenges are and help them, enable them to meet their most significant risks first. And so if I'm walking around a factory or a production line or a construction site, and I see something that's like really small and super low risk, I might mention it, but I won't focus on it and start spending 3 hours on something small. We'll find the significant issues. And if you actually help people understand that we actually need to prioritize and be pragmatic in our approach, and help people, this is the other thing, help people to interpret what they need. So don't tell them this law says that, this law says this. They don't want to know that. They just want to know how to comply with the law. So tell people what they need to know at the right time in a practical way that actually means that you give them some support, they get something done, they see the benefit, and then that's the step by step, culturally, over time, people will then start to value the OSH resource that's there. But to do that, you've got to talk to people. You've got to talk to people in a way that they want to be spoken to. And what I mean by that is that for me, I've got a job I'm doing at the moment where I'm literally putting on overalls, walking around a chemical plant, and I'm spending a couple of hours out. Now, do I have time for that? I would have said no before I started that, but it's the most important thing I do because you're being visible, you're being seen, you're engaging with people. So sometimes you just got to go for it and don't think how you want to tell them it, ask how they want to receive it, and you might get a bit further down the line.
I love that. Put people first is what it's all about. So April, turning to you and thinking about culture in territories where there's probably, there could be no health and safety legal requirements at all. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities that we have? Thinking in terms of culture, and what are your experiences of culture in different parts of the world?
Yes, I mean, most of the countries I work at, they are actually having some, compliance standards and some regulations for health and safety. But the thing is that putting it into a management system, setting it up and running it is totally different things. And sometimes I kind of like what a lot of points that Craig mentions, that is sometimes people don't understand that we are developing those systems or putting on those regulations to protect them, like labor law, labor code is actually to protect workers' rights. But a lot of workers, they don't understand. Okay, for example, like overtime. Overtime is like limited hours actually to protect their health. But some workers, they just need to make more money. So they rather work in the factory that don't have any like work overtime like limits, maximum limits. So, but for the factory, they are actually having the systems. Then we need to persuade, we need to making people understand why we are having so many regulations around like health and safeties, and why we are doing, you know, the like patrols at the shop floors, and or while we are putting it on the KPIs, you know, and people don't feel comfortable about that. But we need to make them understand. Mm-hmm. And the first step is use the language they understand. Use, you know, because we are doing this not for company, we are doing this for them, and then literally they will understand.
So so just thinking about, because actually Craig was talking about language, and you and I had a discussion around language when we were getting ready for this, and do you just want to talk a little bit more about how the language that we use can influence in different ways?
Okay, like my role is, I don't consider myself as an expert like in environmental or, you know, energies or health and safety, but I'm managing this in the past decades, and I'm lucky that I have some like great experts in my team. But the first thing when I interview them or when I recruit people into my team is that whether I can understand what they are talking about or not, no matter it's English or Mandarin. So if they can put something, you know, very difficult, like technical term, into something very simple and I can understand, then I think they will have no problem working with the other functions or shop floor, you know, management. So the language is not about, you know, because I'm all such professionals, you know, they are used to use the terms or they are familiar with, but sometimes even though it's in the same language, but people just don't get it.
Yeah, and it's because we definitely have a language, don't we, as health and safety professionals, and it's again, it's coming back to what you were saying, Craig, is thinking about how we phrase things so that we phrase things in a way that people can receive them in the right kind of way, and we don't have to bamboozle people with our technical knowledge necessarily. The technical is really, really important. Of course, we have to know that, but actually the smart stuff comes from breaking it down and thinking about how it's received. And I love that. Thank you. So James, coming to yourself now, I love this next question because I you know, design, we think about designing construction, there's design, how we design our organizations, and for me, by creating good design, we can almost eliminate some sort of hazards that we have. In terms of social sustainability and how we create our organizations and how we design our organizations, you know, what are some insights that you can offer around that?
Around design, around designing the culture, around designing the
and organizations, and how, you know, how we approach creating a strong organizational, I don't like to use the word structure in this context, but
there's lots of elements in there, but I think one of the key ones for this bit is it has to be two-directional. So a culture, to build a culture, it has to be about listening as well as telling, and it's about asking the right questions. We're very, very good at asking questions. Well, we ask lots of questions. We're not always very, very good at asking them. We ask lots of questions. We don't always get the insight as to why people have answered those questions. And I think that sometimes, I mean, I can just read in, you know, you can ask a question, how are you satisfied with your, with OSH within the business? And, you know, you might, 65% might say yes. But what does that actually tell you in the long run? What do you actually learn from that? All you've got is a number. So it's very much around a two-way communication of listening to people, asking the right questions, delving into why people think what they're thinking, and why they're doing what they're doing, what the perceptions are, honing that and getting that insight that you can take and having those discussions. And I think there's a key thing for managers in there around having those discussions with people. So why is it that you think that? Why did you say that? How can we support you better to do that task? What do we need to do differently? And become a learning organization. It's a bit of an old cliche, learning organization, but I don't think we do enough of that when we're looking at setting up these sorts of systems and programs. We do that because it meets, and again, so as the other panelists have said, absolutely right, we do it because it meets a legal requirement, but nobody really quite understands why we're doing it. Just it's getting done to them. And I think people much better engage much better when they're involved and understand why it's been done. And I think that's the key element.
And when it's integrated, that's what we're trying to achieve, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't know if it's integrated unless we know what people are working towards. And we don't know what people are working towards and what they think about it unless we ask them. So yeah, absolutely. That's my take in a nutshell, my little take on that one.
Yeah, thank you. It's a team sport, isn't it?
It is, absolutely it is. And it's good to talk, as I think somebody posted on the chat there, it's good to talk. It certainly is.
Craig, coming to you, thinking about this was the question about training that you and I discussed earlier, and how do we support our operational colleagues that we work alongside to make wise risk-based choices? How do we do that? I mean, should they be doing the same training as us as health and safety professionals? How can we facilitate this? How can we support them to make wise risk-based choices when they're doing all the other stuff that they're doing within their organizations?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to decide what we want from the training, because many organizations I go to and they tell me about their fantastic KPIs and that everybody's trained, and I go, brilliant. Do they use the training that they're given? Well, they don't measure that. And so when I'm training, for example, I don't train people how to pass the course. I train people the material so they can use that after they finish the course. And my worry is that on any level course you do, if you literally just focus on getting the delegate to pass, then they could, if they want to, leave that knowledge in the classroom or the virtual classroom and then go back to the day job. And that's why, for example, that the IOSH Leading Safely course is really good, as you know, because you deliver this as well. But I like it because you spend a number of hours with a senior management team, and then they have to produce a personal commitment, which then, if you're doing the training like I do for a single client, you actually collect all those personal commitments, put them into an action tracking sheet and reissue it back, and then challenge them in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time. Have you done what you said you're going to do? And so at that level, that's really effective. And I appreciate you can't do that for some of the other courses, but for me, it's about giving people the right training at the right time in their career journey, but also let them practice it. So I've got one client that to be able to approve risk assessments and method statements, for example, they've got to have completed the IOSH Managing Safely course, and that's really good. So they're actually having the training on how to look at risk and hazards and everything else, but actually they've then got to use it in practice. And for me, that's the challenge. And that's why refresher training is there. It's not for a training provider just to scoop loads more money in 3 years' time. It's to try and top up and refresh and make sure it's right. But if you give people that ownership, then they will start to take it on board, and they realize that they don't have to contact the OSH professional every time they want to do something. And a truly supportive OSH professional will explain to people that with that increased knowledge in risk, you can manage that risk yourself. But if you make a wrong decision along the way and there's like a slight issue, you're not going to, the world doesn't end. We find the issue, we deal with it, you get the root cause, and then you support them again, and then they make any changes. And I think that's the challenge. Train people, make sure they understand it, and then empower them to do that role. But then know where the ceiling is. when something's beyond your competence, don't keep going. Stop.
Have a
Ask for
good
help.
frame. Have a good frame.
Definitely.
And by the way, I'm going to start coming to the questions in the Q&A box in a moment. So if you are in the audience, and we've got nearly 500 people on the call at the moment, so do put your questions in the Q&A bar, and I will be coming to those shortly. So just thinking along the same kind of route of conversation, April, I'm going to ask you a question now, because you've been working alongside the teams in IOSH to help us to really frame this campaign, and have been hugely supportive of the work that's being undertaken. So that means you've spent a bit of time with health and safety professionals. So how, from your perspective, how can health and safety professionals support you? And if what's some advice that you could give the people in the audience here?
Can you read?
So what would make, what's the, what kind of support do you need in your role from health and safety professionals? What are you looking for? What makes good advice? What makes good teamwork with you?
Yes, I would appreciate if my team come to me and tell me about the system fraud that's not working, or the system that is actually, put in there only for, the government check or customers audits, but it's not working. Or I appreciate that, my team, they come to me for any advice that I can actually, because I'm a foreigner, I'm an expat at, my previous roles. So I told them that I don't understand about how people work or make things work at that culture, at that place. So I always tell my team is that, okay, the goal is this, tell me how to achieve it. And then if they can come to me and tell me some, solutions or some suggestions, that would be great.
Yeah, I can agree with that more. Is don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution, definitely.
Yeah, and a lot of things I don't understand why some people, they just don't comply with the procedures, or when we do the audits, our internal audit, we found a lot of issues, and I just don't understand why we cannot, make it. And sometimes we need OSH professionals, and especially locals, to help us understanding what is the gap.
Yeah, so, no, that's really useful.
Yes.
So I know that you've got a really varied background, and one of the areas that we were talking about is how you've brought your varied, and I think this is the same for all of us. We bring all of our experience with us. But we were talking very much about how people feel and supporting how they feel, and using your previous roles and experience, and perhaps you can give us some insights into that.
Yes, I consider myself more like a social worker, but I grew up in a footwear business, family, and then I put my career into footwear manufacturing. So I found myself in different countries. I see me as a social worker, and my clients actually those production workers with very low educational levels, and their understandings about a lot of things are very limited, and they need to really work hard in order to make a living, by working at the factories. And so for me, is that I consider myself is a role that I need to protect them by, at least by law, providing them environments that, they can work safely, and in the long run, it won't impact their health. So that that's how I see my value in my roles. And that's how I always tell my team. So I empower my team and tell them that, hey, your role is very important. Okay, because you can actually help me to protect your people, the people that in this, communities. And for the team that are working in the environment, then they are actually protecting their home because they live there. Okay. And for the labor compliances, they are helping, they are actually protecting workers' basic rights. So
and that's where you've brought in the community that people are living in, and it's that good work we know is good for people, and then it becomes good for business, which is what we're talking about. And I'm going to start coming to the Q&A box now. Shane Byrne has said, I absolutely agree with you, April. I live and work in Southeast Asia. Every country here has quite strict health and safety regulations. However, there are times when the rules are not enforced, or more importantly, not sustainable to the employee when balanced against their productivity and rewards. So some words of encouragement for you there, April. And James, I'm going to come to you now with a question from Florentina. There's quite a lot in here. I'm not going to read through the whole question, but what she's asked is, so working as a health and safety, she's been involved in consultancy. How difficult, James, is it to shift the focus to people? And what tools can an employee have to be able to, where do we start? We go into an organization, it might not be its top priority. We want it to be one of its core values. Where do we start?
Right. There's a big challenge.
And we've only got a few more minutes left.
I was going to say, we've got 18 minutes to tackle that one. Right. As with anything, it's around starting at the top, and you look at and asking the question where the business wants to go and where it wants to be. Again, some of the stats, I refer to that 25% stat of workers wanting to change jobs early. That's actually from the 2022 Sustainability Trends report by ERM. It was just out today, actually. But I think those are the sorts of figures that senior managers need to be starting to understand. It's, if you don't value your workers, then this is what could happen. So where do you want to go as a business? Well, if you want to achieve, 15%, 10% growth, whatever that looks like in the next 5 years, how are you going to do it without any people? And unless you've got your people on board with you, unless you're giving them the right skills and competency, which I totally agree with around sustainability and the need for getting people trained, to make them competent, unless you're communicating with them, unless you're making them feel valued, then they're not going to stay with you. And they're going to move on to somebody else who does make them feel valued. And you have to start all over again with recruitment and training. And then you've got the start again building a culture. And it just takes time, and it just detracts from where you want to be. So I think it's around, as I said a little bit earlier, about aligning those goals and saying, well, your goals are actually not mutually exclusive to the goals of social sustainability. In fact, if you do social sustainability well, it will help you to achieve your goals.
That whole talent management piece is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what's going to get, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges in the next two or 3 years. Is businesses actually retaining that talent. People have had a lot of time to think about what they want to do. I mean, the virus has necessitated people working from home. Now businesses are saying to me, you have to come back into the office. Well, do I want to do that, or do I want to go somewhere else? There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be thinking about, well, do I want to continue to work for this employer? And if they're not going to value me, that's just another reason and not going to look after my welfare. They're not going to talk about and they're not going to give me the skills I need to do the job properly. Then they're going to move on. And wherever your long-term goals are, you're not going to get there.
Yeah, I think I hear that a lot too. It's, we've gone through so much change. We've definitely got a skills shortage. And that people focus is just, there is no people tree, is there?
Absolutely. And we've seen it recently in the pay rises that have been offered to some of the jobs. There was the vital jobs, but you're having to offer now huge pay rises to keep people because they're worried that they'll move on, and you'll not be able to recruit. And all
Absolutely.
that will be seriously damaging to your bottom line or whatever growth target you have.
Yeah, turnover is really hard to manage in any business, isn't it?
Louise, can I just add to
Yeah.
that? In that, to be effective, you've got to speak several languages. Now, not in the way that people probably think. So I've had to learn how to speak finance, management, engineering, whatever it is, whatever role it is. So if I want to make change in an organization, I go and talk to finance, but I talk about the saving they will have if they do this properly. You spoke about design earlier. If you design out the risk, you're probably going to save a lot of money, not actual real money, not just you might get prosecuted. Actually, you can make people's journeys shorter when you're working out production layouts and things like that. So build safety in, and when you talk to people in finance, tell them the savings. When you're talking to engineering, tell them the practical options. And when you're talking to workers, talk to them about going home and not having to fill out all the paperwork when you have an accident. And that's the challenge, in that, we've got to show that good safety is good business. And if you do that, then you get all levels tied in together.
Talking about what good looks like, isn't it?
Yeah.
We like talking about the positive stuff, don't we, Craig?
We do.
And Jake Moffat has said, Craig, I agree with you. Does the old adage hold up that we as OSH professionals should aim to support, coach, and develop operational teams to develop health and safety for themselves, and we're really there to nurture and guide rather than do the doing. Jake, I absolutely love that. I completely agree with you. And turning to April now, Linda has asked a question. How would you advise health and safety professionals in how best to approach a client or someone in a superior position, perhaps in quite a structured company? How would you, what are your recommendations for asking them to spend money on health and safety? How would they dig into their pockets?
Talking about money, usually when I know something that really requires investments, I will myself will work with my team, like brainstorm with my team. Are there any other alternatives that we can do it and without or with less money? Mm-hmm. Because money is very sensitive, and I believe that we can be very creative. Sometimes you want to reach the goal, you don't really need to go through like very expensive trainings. I mean, there are other ways, or we can break down the trainings into like seasons. So the superior, they don't feel like, they need to, spend a huge amount of money for one thing. So I would suggest that, breaking the investment small. And so when the superior, they can see the ROI returns from the investment, then they will have confidence in investing in more. So I think the first things before we go to the superior is I do homework. I do my studies really carefully about that. What would be the ROI that can bring from this investment? So if that can really convince myself, then I'll bring that to my leaderships. And if I want to do that, I can really talk through to my leadership to support me. That's my strategies.
Yeah, and I think working in, and I think you work in some similar sectors to Craig, is that your industry is quite process driven and used to measuring productivity. Yes. And it's, can you create a campaign that involves people and measure the before and after, and hopefully will increase productivity at the same time as we make people safer.
Yes. And the most important thing is we really need to show people the impact. If we are doing something with no positive impact, then people then lose the confidence.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And just so coming to you next, James. Chris Germain has said, good answer, James. I guess one of the questions is, how do you retain talent within your organization, which I think we've probably answered. But the question that I love for you is from Terence, and he says, which I love this question.
Right.
Are rule followers safer? Are rule breakers less safe? What a great question.
Right. I think the answer to that is no. I think crikey. Where do you start?
Craig, do you want to help out here?
I think it depends on whether the rules are right.
Yeah, it does.
You know, I had a client a few years ago. They had this program. They call. It was a 3-month lead in, and they said, "What is written is done." It was an absolute mandate. You must follow all rules, all procedures at all times. And it was they even had artwork drawn up, and it was really, really focused on. Within 3 weeks, the campaign was scrapped because they realised the rules in many places were not correct, and they developed workarounds because the procedures weren't good enough over the years. And so I think, so it's, if you're going to enforce the rules, make sure that they're right. Because again, a safety practitioner that goes out there with a clipboard and saying it's written here that you must do this, and actually, has a negative conversation with somebody, they're just perceived as, a job's worth, and they're ticking a box. Whereas if you actually go out there and say, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Is that how it's written on the procedure? No. All right. Well, how do you then get the procedure changed? Have you reported it back? And, can you think of what wording you would use? And have you spoken to somebody about it? Mm-hmm. If you engage people and bring them up along the way, they might actually go and do the official bit properly, change the rules, and be safer because of it at the end of the day. They might not, but you've got to try.
It's part of being creative. James?
I'll just add in there. I mean, one of the bits of that the unions used to do was work to rule, which basically meant they only did what you told them to do. Mm-hmm. And businesses found that was much more disruptive than actually going on strike in the first place. So that just backs up Craig's comment there, that it depends on what the rules are.
Yeah. And April, I'm going to come to you because I love that question. Thanks, Terence. So from your perspective and thinking about, different territories and about rules, that's an interesting question. From your perspective, have you got any insights, April? Is it safer to follow the rules? Are rule breakers less safe?
I would say the followers are safer in not physically safe, but politically safe.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know the culture, the Asian culture or Western culture. I mean, followers are always safer. The break rule the person that break the rule is always has to take some risk. So I mean, I kind of like put the physically safety aside, but I mean politically safety, yes, follower is safer.
Yeah, I think we could probably have an entire session on that question, which I think is great. I think, we sometimes need to step outside the rules to innovate. And if we're going to empower people, we want them to, continually improve, don't we? So,
yes, but I want to echo that for the rule breakers, actually, sometimes they are the person that can really bring some innovative ideas.
Yeah.
To the organization, but politically, maybe, they need to take some risk to challenge the organization.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I could keep coming to these questions, but I'm gonna, believe it or not, we're coming towards the end of the session. So I said it was going to go fast. I'm going to come to each of you in turn, and perhaps you can just sort of wrap up with a positive insight that will support everybody listening on, catching the wave. So, Craig, I'm going to come to you first.
So from my perspective, I think you just need to be very mindful of the recipient, who you're dealing with. So like I said, if you're dealing with finance, explain things in a financial way, in an analytical way. If you're dealing with production, you're thinking about, how they want to meet their requirements. But also, I think with non-OSH professionals, we need to let them focus on the message, not necessarily what the literal line of a law or regulation says, because we're there to help interpret regulations. let people know what they need to do to be safe. So give them the right information at the right time with the support to get it done, and that will build that in over time. And it does work. It really, really does work. You just need to invest your time in it. And James mentioned about leading from the top. Totally agree. But I've also seen organizations that have led from the bottom because they've had enough, and they then, in a nice, correct, efficient way, work together to then get the management listening, and then they work together, and then they go to awesome places.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, top down, bottom up, side to side, and a bit of a shimmy in the middle.
Yep.
James, same question for you.
Same question,
Positive point
Positive.
to leave with?
Yeah, for me, it's remembering that people are the heart of sustainability, and a safe, well-motivated workforce is going to help you to achieve your sustainability aims. And OSH is just part of that toolkit that will give you a safe, well-motivated workforce. So it's absolutely the right time to be getting the message that OSH can help you drive towards the bigger targets, and it's not a niche, something to be sidelined and to be looked at separately. It's absolutely part of what you're doing.
Brilliant. And there's still stuff in the chat about breaking rules, which is brilliant. I wish we could capture that. But same question to you, April.
To me, I think, okay, safety is important, but, I want to make it like more friendly, to everyone. Safety is not just important in the organization, but it's also in the community, in everyone's, living areas. So for me, since I work with a lot of production workers, so I always focus on the simple things, they can easily remember and what matters to them. They can apply them at work. They can also apply them at life. They can also teach their kids, and when they started to embed those, safety mindsets and turn them into behavior, then we can build on that to and bring up to a next level.
I love that, is that, we should definitely feel welcomed within the organizations for the caring professionals that we are. So I think that's really valuable insight. So thank you for that. Well, an hour has completely flashed past. Each time I host one of these, I think they get shorter and shorter. But sadly, I am going to have to draw this webinar to a close. It's been a fantastic session and a great contribution to what is continuing to be an impactful campaign. So in this webinar, we've noted that the OSH professional has a key role to play in ensuring that businesses become more sustainable in the future by putting their people at the centre of their concerns. I suspect that this is not a very surprising finding for you, given who IOSH represents. So as OSH professionals, we not only have the right technical knowledge to contribute to socially sustainable business, but also we have the right influence in communicating and leadership skills to make a convincing business case for social sustainability, workplaces, policies and practices. And this is about I don't call them soft skills, this is about true power skills. The experiences of our panelists clearly show the financial and other benefits of making occupational safety and health a legitimate business concern. It's up to all of us to use our technical and our power skills to demonstrate this working across our organisations as facilitators and influencers working alongside and with others as part of a team. There have been positive changes in the perception of the need for occupational safety and health management. This is a journey rather than a destination. There will always be work for us to do to make businesses, and by extension our communities, regions and economies, sustainable in its long term. So it's up to us as health and safety professionals to equip and position ourselves well and to drive good work forward. April, James and Craig, thank you so much for your contributions today. And of course, thank you to our delegates for joining, listening and learning with us. I very much hope that this webinar has been stimulating for the mind, but also a prompt for action. The IOSH Catch the Wave campaign is all about effecting transformation and helping you to articulate this. So do join the campaign and work with us at IOSH to make the most of our collective knowledge, skills and experience to shape a better, healthier world of work. Our next webinar in the series will take place on Thursday, the 17th of February. Its title is Understanding People, Wellbeing Made Better. Right now on your screen, you will see details of how to get involved and where to go for more information. I personally want to encourage each and every one of you to visit our campaign page, which you can find easily on the homepage of the IOSH website. You'll find a whole host of information as well as excellent resources and content relating to the campaign, including the recordings for these webinars from the series. So with that, I bring this webinar to a close and thank you all for catching the wave with IOSH. People, sustainability, and putting heart into health and safety. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.